FDA rolls back rules for fifth time during pandemic. The things that they sneak through when you're not paying attention. Thanks to Anonymous for sending me this. This is off the Washington Post here. Manufacturers may now substitute ingredients without relabeling, and vending machine operators may ditch calorie information. Now, if you're getting your meals from a vending machine, you've already got a problem, sort of thing. But this is exactly what we talk about when I do the shows. Jeff C. Live with Camille. We talk about that we don't. They're always circumnavigating the whole thing, and the labels only tell part of the story. Really, you really don't know what's in a lot of your foods. And this is all by design. This is how they're going to, Codex Alimentarius sort of take over and give us the Soylent Green and whatnot, whatever's in our food. So we'll take a look into this article here and see what they're saying here. The Food and Drug Administration has temporarily loosened labeling and information rules for food manufacturers for the fifth time during the novel coronavirus pandemic. Again, it's sleight of hand. I mean, you're watching the big scamdemic show, but you're not watching what the other hand is doing. And again, we all, even myself, right, covering so much of what's going on, it's easy to miss these types of stories that are very important, obviously, because you are what you eat. The changes are intended to ease manufacturers' supply chain snags, but advocacy groups say they are concerned that the changes will become permanent and that they will present problems for consumers concerned about tracking the provenance of their food. The new guidelines allow manufacturers to substitute hard-to-source ingredients in their products without changing the label. And it allows vending machine operators latitude to admit calorie information for foods sold. So, substitute hard-to-source ingredients. Wait a second. What exactly are you eating then? What could be in these things? And we talk about the nanotech that they could be putting in these things as well. Not just the genetically modified ingredients, but there's just so much that they're doing, all the lab-grown meats that they're making, the plant-based burgers and all this stuff. We really have to keep a close eye on our foods. I mean, there's few things in life that are more important than food. I mean, you could say air and water, but you're not going to survive long without a meal. So, it behooves us all to really pay attention to this. And again, you shouldn't be getting your meals from a vending machine. But one of the things that I showed, if people can recall this last year, it was showing a character, a butt feed character, Safia Nygaard, who's one of the most promoted and popular YouTubers. And this thing goes to Japan and Korea and, gets people accustomed to all the New World Order sort of developments or the lifestyles that the New World Order wants to condition people into. So one of them is living in, those capsules, those little pods that they put, like the sewer tubes that they want us to live in the future. Another thing is going to the vending machines, which has become in Japan, it's almost like a normal thing. Like they have these whole areas that are just nothing but machines, and you can get whole meals from them. I doubt any of them are even remotely healthy, but the thing is that with this scamdemic happening, and with the automation happening in all the industries, not just the automotive industry or, the police industry or other things, surveillance industry, but we're also going to have a massive automation when it comes to food. I covered that a couple weeks ago when I did the story about the delivery drones that they're vehicles that deliver your food, but they're also scanning your food or using UV lights on your food as they're delivering it to ostensibly remove any sort of Kobe. And I was like, that is extremely disturbing that your food is being zapped as it's being delivered, right? What are they taking out of it? What are they putting into it? So these are very serious things. Advocacy groups say guidance announced Friday makes it more difficult for people with food allergies to be confident that their food won't make them sick. It walks back some of the advances vending machines have made in the past in offering healthy or healthful choices. We have no objection to the temporary flexibilities. Well, you should in this moment. Why? Why all of a sudden? Oh, there's hard to get ingredients. Well, then don't sell the product. Sell something else. You know, and I hope you all know about the revolving door of the FDA, right? The Food and Drug Administration and Monsanto, aka Satan, Bayer Monsanto, right? One of the biggest corporation. I mean, they're basically in control of most of the world food supply, and they're the ones that developed genetically modified foods, glyphosate, and everything else, right? And so, yeah, they definitely want to poison your foods by all looks of it. But the revolving door with the government, the FDA, and Monsanto. In fact, gotta show it. Just because it's so telling. Monsanto revolving door here. Just so you see how spooky this stuff really is here. And this is the revolving door here, giving you an example of all the, the characters, including people like Donald Rumsfeld and Hillary Clinton. And, I mean, the list here is quite something here. I can't fit it all in, but you got Hillary Clinton, and you got Dr. Charles Thomas, Michael Taylor, of course. I mean, just look at all these names, Michael A. Friedman, and how they're, they either work in the FDA or they worked at Monsanto, and then they worked in the FDA. And in Rumsfeld's, he was the CEO of Searle, which merged with Monsanto, and then he went over to be here, appointed Secretary of Defense, and then appointed Secretary of Defense again in 2000. But he actually was in Monsanto and then came over to the FDA and approved the extremely toxic sweetener, which is aspartame. And this is one of the things that you find in so many of your sweets these days, which is, kids are eating on a daily basis, and they say sugar-free, right? Because they try to convince you, sugar's the real killer. Not that sugar is good for you, but there's other things that are far deadlier than sugar, aspartame being one of them. So just an example of how this revolving door works. They come over, they're previously president and chief executive officer of Monsanto, CEO of NutraSweet, chairman of CEO Monsanto, and then served in president advisory committee, trade policy, White House domestic policy. It's just a revolving door between these hideous New World Order, genetically modified experimental food corporations, these hideous multinational corporations that control most of farming, most of agriculture in the world, Monsanto being, right, Bayer Monsanto right now, and then the revolving door with the FDA. So it's very important for people to realize that. And when we're talking about this stuff, so they say they have no objection to the temporary flexibility. You should have objection to it all, but we view with suspicion the notion that you'd want to continue with those after the emergency, said Laura McCleary, policy director of the Center of Science and Public Interest. They say they will take comments and consider an extension beyond the public health emergency. And this goes with the HR 6666 and all the other things that they're bringing in, just like they did with 9/11. Once they're here, they typically stay. So what are we going to be eating? What are we eating already? And this is another loophole that gives these corporations like Bayer Monsanto the ability to sneak all these potential toxic sort of ingredients into our food. This is just nuts, really. The FDA said the changes to the guidance were temporary and intended to address the public health emergency. The food industry has informed us that there are supply disruptions and shortages. So a perfect storm, because this feeds in. I mean, they can just say that, And then they can say, well, look, the food shortages and all that, which they created themselves, of course. As a result, manufacturers may need to make formulation changes such as omissions or submissions of minor ingredients. FDA spokesman Peter Castle said in an email, I wonder what his whole record is, to address the situation and continue to support food supply chain during this emergency, the FDA issuing guidance to industry to provide temporarily flexibility for manufacturers to make minor formulation changes in certain circumstances without making the conforming label changes. And again, I probably don't have to remind folks, but how many hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars that the major food producers, which really isn't food, you say Coca-Cola and Frito-Lay and all these mega corporations, Johnson and Johnson, there's just so many of them, but they have fought tooth and nail and put gazillions of dollars to stop any genetically modified labeling. Do you think they're ever going to label, the other ingredients that they're putting in, potentially nanotech and whatnot they could be putting into our foods? So that's a very convenient sort of thing for them. Other temporary changes that the FDA has issued since the start of the pandemic addresses nutrition labeling on food packaging, menu labeling on fast food chains, and 2 involving the packaging and labeling of eggs. These rules have eased requirements for nutrition fact labeling on restaurant food repurposed for retail sale and have included cryptic guidance for food manufacturers with links that don't work. Links that don't work. The 5th rule change. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Maybe we're gonna have 6. I don't know. It's probably gonna keep happening. Eases requirements on vending machine operators to provide calorie information for food sold during the pandemic. So, I think that's the least of your worries, really. And it says that a manufacturer may swap secondary ingredients so long as the stand-in does not cause any adverse health, including food allergies, gluten, sulfites, and other ingredients known to cause sensitivities in some people. For example, glutamates. The gluten. That's a big gluten crap. Castle said the formulation should be consistent with general factors such as safety, including food allergies and prominence of the ingredients. But for the estimated 32 million people in the United States with food allergies, the devil is in the details, said Dave Bloom, chief executive of Snack Safely. I don't think you should snack at all, really. A food allergy organization wrote in a blog, the guidance goes on to introduce numerous loopholes that are a concern to members of the food allergy community. Betsy Burin, Senior Vice President of Regulatory and Technical Affairs at the Consumer Brands Association, a trade group formerly known as Grocery Manufacturers Association, says the FDA changes reflect a desperately needed flexibility to relocate foods and alleviate hiccups in supply chains during the pandemic. Again, problem, reaction, solution, certainly to, they created the pandemic, the scamdemic. And now all of a sudden, guess what? FDA is saying, no, you don't worry about what you're putting in there. It's okay. No big deal. You're making some changes. Whatever. We'll let you get away with it. The Department of Agriculture and the FDA have been proactive to get food that was in food service arena and transferring it to retail, she said by phone. She says that the disruption in international supply chains for spices and other ingredients have forced manufacturers to find new supplies and swap ingredients. And how many of these new ingredients will be, 1, genetically modified or plant-based, grown in a lab, these experimental foods that the Soylent Green stuff that they're making for us. And then the big worry, of course, the nanotech and whatnot. This guidance was the FDA recognizing that there could be some minor changes that do not impact food safety. To change a label takes upward of 2 years for a food company. Doing the analysis, sending products to the printer, all that takes time. The FDA is allowing disclosure stickers and smart labels. Smart labels for stupid people. The FDA says the temporary substitution of certain oils, such as canola for sunflower, may be appropriate without label change because they contain similar types of fats. And with flour in short supply, bleached unbleached flour can be substituted for bleached flour without a label change. Manufacturers now have the flexibility to substitute spices or vegetables without alerting customers because of these new guidelines. And for vending machines, providing calorie information is no longer required, although it is encouraged. There are 4 million vending machines in the United States. Right now, the industry has a major shift, says Ronnie Moore, Vice President of Marketing of National Automatic Merchandising Association, the trade group representing 25 billion vending machine industry. That's no small industry. That's a ginormous industry. And then you think, as we move towards the automation, and again, look at Japan, look at Korea, look at places where this has already become the norm. There are a ton of people in places like Japan that's where they get their meals from. These vending machines, soups and breads and, all kinds of other things that these machines make for you. And they'll be coming out with more and more sophisticated machines that have robots in them. They've already done it with the pizzas and stuff, and they already have a lot of restaurants now that are employing robots that will cook the food for you and slice it and dice it and all this stuff. This is all happening, so this is all part of their plan, undoubtedly. Those in office and other workspaces in schools and in malls have spent the past 2 months in suspended animation. They're Cool Ranch Doritos and Duchess Honey Buns. These are things you should never eat, really. Cool Ranch Doritos, the Illuminati chip, Duchess Honey Buns, going nowhere until regular work and school activity remains. But conversely, she says vending machines in 911 call centers, police stations, and firehouses and medical centers are busy. Particularly during the pandemic, first responders are looking for a path of least resistance. Get me food and caffeine now. Is it really food, though? In many cases, there's been nowhere else to go during the pandemic, and vending machines offer low contact delivery. There you go, low contact, even though people are touching the thing. But of course, this is all going to move. The vending machines of the future will read your face instantly and say, "Hey, Jeff C., you look like you could use a Guinness." Right? I could maybe, but not one with any of your Monsanto stuff in it. So she says the association sent a letter to the FDA Commissioner Stephen Hahn requesting flexibility to change inventory when feeding first responders. Mike Holler, a food safety technical manager for UL, a third-party safety company that conducts food audits, says the FDA changes are minor and intended to protect manufacturers from liability over undisclosed formulation changes. They're minor, okay. So the changes are minor and intended to protect manufacturers from liability over undisclosed formulation changes. This is the most important sentence or segment in the entire article, because that's the whole thing. Just like the pharmaceutical corporations are no longer responsible for the deaths and horrible health side effects that many people, thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions even around the world, have received from getting the forced vaccinations. They're doing the same thing with the food corporations, saying, hey, if people start dropping dead from eating your Doritos or your whatever, the honey buns, Duchess honey buns, we're not liable. If a company says it's made with real butter, they have to stick with that. But if the company doesn't have vanilla extract for their chocolate chip cookies, they can substitute a minor ingredient like that. They are balancing these changes with disruptions in food supply. Although he says he's not concerned with the allergens going undisclosed, people with dietary restrictions, such as avoiding salt, may not be privy to the formulation changes that potentially affect them. They could change things like that. It's always good to ask. Food industry watchdogs argue that it is unclear whom and how to ask, and many are concerned that the policy changes could become permanent as part of a broader push to deregulation by the Trump administration. Our intention is to hold the FDA to the calendar so that these changes aren't permanent, says Mac Cleary. The important thing is everybody know and be clear that after this emergency is over, that these regulations that have been subject of so much public effort and deliberation come back into play. this shouldn't be a reason things get watered down permanently. So this is a story for all of us to keep a very close eye on, because as I said, once these changes come in, but I would strongly recommend to folks, do not, I rarely ever use one of these machines to get anything, because I'm not going to eat. I don't consider it food. I don't consider it a healthy choice. So I would suggest to folks to avoid all these machines. I mean, there's just another reason to do so, and to detox and avoid all these corporations, especially any of them that are connected to Bayer Monsanto or the big Coca-Cola and Co. All these, we've got to be very concerned about what they're putting into our foods, especially with the tech that they're developing, the lab-based sort of concoctions, all the things that they could potentially be putting into our foods. It's very, very important that people remain ever vigilant and wary of any sort of these policy changes. And always remember the revolving door. Never forget the revolving door of Monsanto, and the FDA. And I try to fit them all in there so you can see. One of the most important things that you could pass around to let people know how it works, right? They are not trying to make us healthier, that's for sure. And you look around you, you see in the United States, 35%, over a third of Americans are obese. They're not, same here in Canada. I say America, I mean Canada as well, but over a third of people are obese. Why do you think that's happening? Well, what are they putting into our foods? Right? And we all worry about salt and sugar and stuff, and I think a lot of us worry about genetically modified things, but what else is there? So hopefully, I'm going to get contact Camille, get another show going. Maybe we'll discuss this further. I hope you guys are beating the heat and having a great time, keeping cool and staying on top of things and doing the best that you can. I'll see you guys all on the next one. God bless you all. Take it easy, folks.